you're coming from in the world. And by the way, happy Lunar New Year, wherever you are. 恭喜发财，新年快乐, right? Whatever. Happy Lunar New Year, wherever you are coming from. I am the year of the snake. I was born in the year of the snake. I don't know if you guys know the year that you were born in, and it just so happens to be the year of the snake this year. So, awesome, kind of cool. Although apparently it's supposed to be inauspicious. I don't know. Apparently it's supposed to be not good luck to have the year to be in the year that you were born. I don't know. I don't know how it works. But I'm not superstitious, so I'm not worried. But yeah, welcome, Nikhil. Yes, have a glorious morning. Have a glorious day as well. So what I'm going to be sharing today is really some of my favorite books that I've been reading recently, and kind of some of what I've been learning recently from them, and the insights and the connections that I've been making, and more importantly, I want to share some ways that they can actually help us in the real world. Like, what can these books actually do for us, and how can they help us in the real world? And I'm gonna actually, because I just got back from the gym, so I'm gonna pull up my notes here. I'm actually just gonna pull up my notes. So, hold on. The first one I'm going to talk about, first book that I'm going to actually talk about here it's a great book. It's called Tribal. I forget the author off the top of my head, but Tribal. Hold on, no, Tribal book. I forget the author, man. But these are actually recent books. All of these are like recently published books, and so spilled some coffee. Not good, but anyway. Drinking coffee, chatting with you guys, doing this at the same time. Unenid. I don't know if I said that correctly. Hello and welcome. So, yeah, the first one is going to be Tribal. This book is really great. Tribal, How the Cultural Instincts That Divide Us Can Help Bring Us Together. That's the full title, by Michael Morrison. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this book, because I take notes. I don't take notes on every book, I'll be honest. I don't take notes on every book that I read, but I do take notes, pretty extensive notes, on books that I think are really worth me slowing down and reading. Not everything should be speed read. Everybody wants to know how to read faster and speed read. You don't have to read everything faster. Some things you should read slowly, with a lot of attention to detail. But I mean, I can speed read, but certain ones I do take a lot of notes on. And so the first point from this book that I want to actually talk about is, and again, takeaways. How can we use this for our life, right? And feel free to share in the chat any good books you've been reading recently. And also, I want to know maybe like, what are some of your questions in terms of personal growth? What are you working on in terms of goals? I want to hear all of it, because I love this community. I love you guys. I want to learn what you guys are up to, and I want to learn about your lives too. It's not all about me, right? So the first point of this book, big takeaway from this book, is that well, so the interesting hypothesis, and this is not unique to this book. Oh, okay, good questions. Munib, welcome. And then Unenid, how to study effectively. You know what? Before I even get into this book, then I'll answer your questions. So Munib, Robert Greene's books. Robert Greene, I will say, Robert Greene, in recent years, I'm going to preface it this way. In recent years, Robert Greene has been, putting out a lot of great content, actually, I will say. A lot of good stuff in terms of personal development, personal growth. So, I mean, I don't know him personally, so I can't say, oh, is he like a good guy or something like that? I don't know. But he seems like he puts out some really good stuff, like thoughtful stuff. That being said, if we look at, two of his most famous books, right? The 48 Laws of Power, or I think it's the Laws of Human Nature. Yeah, so you guys are both asking about study tips. So yeah, I will. Laws of human nature. So my issue with Robert Greene Munib is that he doesn't provide any sources for what he talks about. I'm a big believer that if you're actually giving any self-help advice, um, self-help advice is behavioral advice. It's literally when you're giving self-help advice, you're making behavioral science claims. You're actually making claims, scientific claims. You're making scientific claims that need to have sources to them, need to have data to support them. He does not provide in any of his books any kind of data. I mean, besides like historical examples that he gives, but I mean, we can all cherry pick historical examples. I can give you any kind of historical examples, right? And cherry pick those, right? Um, it's just too easy. It's too easy to do that. Done. Welcome. Yeah, and I do think Robert Greene's books can have an kind of a I don't want to say like an evil impact. It's just wrong thinking. Listen, if he were right, then great. You should follow all of his advice. If he's actually correct, then follow all of his advice. But actually, everything in behavior that we see in behavioral science, all of the current evidence shows that he's just wrong. I mean, he just most of the stuff that he says, it's just wrong. So, and that's not me being opinionated. It's just me knowing the research that's out there in terms of how humans actually behave. It's like not accurate what he's saying. So, um, and then how to study effectively. Unanid, I think I'm saying. Give any study tip, Nikhil. And then done. You're saying like, oh, welcome. I don't know how to QUCBBS, right? Welcome. I don't know how to pronounce that, but welcome to the live stream. So I got a lot of you guys done. You're asking about memory. Okay. This is interesting. Okay, so study tips. I think I'm gonna condense this into one discussion. What all of you guys are asking, because you guys are asking about study tips and memory, and memory actually plays a big role in study tips. Um, Whatever we're studying, and I'm always studying. I'm always studying something. I mean, I'm a perpetual, lifelong student. I just came from the gym, and this is literally what I do at the gym. And this is kind of, maybe part of your study tips here or memory techniques. But I'll talk about the study tips and I'll talk about the memory tips, together after this. But basically, when I go to the gym, I kind of multitask. Multitasking isn't bad unless as long as it's like a physical activity and a cognitive activity. You can multitask effectively. Just can't do it with two cognitive activities. But anyway, I do my warm ups for weights at the gym, and then what I'll do during my warm up is like 40 minutes. I know I'm crazy, but my warm up is like 40 minutes, and during that warm up, I will actually listen to something that it's either an ebook or like an audio book on history, some sort of history. Like this week, it's African history. I'm reviewing like a lot of this stuff I've learned before, but it's like you forget stuff over time, right? So I'm listening to that, and then after when I get on the treadmill after my strength workout, when I get into my cardio, I'm on the treadmill. I do a long workout in the morning, but when I'm on the treadmill, I will start reading the current ebook that I'm reading, and I'll do literally about 15 minutes of that a day, right? Just that ebook, and then I'll put it away, whatever my current ebook is. So I'm actually learning different things all at the same time because I want to stay current. I want to stay updated. So in terms of how do I remember all of it, right? Because let's say you're taking different courses or you're just learning different things at the same time. You know, how do you remember all of it? I think the most important thing, you know, Nikhil, it's a good question. Doesn't the ebook give pain to my eyes? I don't really get dry eyes from it or anything. I put it on a low level, a low, Munib, I'll discuss a book that has made a big difference for me. Some books that have made a big impact on me recently. But to answer your question immediately, I think the one of the books that has had the biggest impact on me, I would say in the past few years, is something called The War of Art. Who's the author? If anybody can think of the author before I can find the author. I always forget authors. I can't remember. I'm so bad at names. But The War of Arts, Stephen Pressfield. Stephen Pressfield. Yeah. So The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Check that out. That really has that. It's not a scientific book with a lot of scientific sources and stuff like that, but it's very, it will touch you emotionally, and it will get you to act, and it will get you to take action. It's a really, really good book for that. Done. I love philosophy. Philosophy is part of my background, actually. My part of my academic formal background. So I studied philosophy and history in my undergrad. I studied neurobiology in grad school, and then I've published an academic text. I've published an academic text in value theory, which is kind of like a meshing of neurobiology and those other things. So yes, I love philosophy. Okay, but let me actually talk about Sudekina, yeah, Sudekina, welcome. Methods to summarize, memorize lectures or books. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that in a moment. Stephen Brumfeld, welcome. Expand a little more, please, about the book. I came in live late. Yeah, I will. I'm gonna go into the first book. I haven't even gotten into the first book because you guys are giving like so many questions. Oh my gosh, Prince, it's so funny. You're not the first one to say that. So many people so many people like are so many people have said, "Oh, you look like Mark Zuckerberg." I don't know how to take that personally. If I look like Mark Zuckerberg, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't think I look like Mark Zuckerberg, but some people some people think I look like Mark Zuckerberg. Anyway, study tips, memorization tips. So hold on, I'm gonna answer your questions, and then I'm gonna get into the next book. But welcome, Prince. Um, so so yeah, study tips. I think because I do all that stuff at the gym, right? And I listen to all that stuff, right? Um, and thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. I I don't know. Do I try to be cool? I don't know. I look like an aging Millhouse. Well, hey, Millhouse was always treated badly in The Simpsons. All right, so but let me get to my tips. So you might have heard it a lot before, but you have to discuss what you're talking about. You have to discuss what you're learning. You have to discuss it. Like for instance, I'm last week I was listening to something on Chinese history, right, during my warm-ups every day. But the thing is that um, there are so many facts, and I would say it's hard to, if you're just starting from zero in a topic, and you want to learn something, you want to learn a lot of detail fast. You probably should actually. I'm cracking up from what you guys are saying I look like. All right, commenting on my appearance, right? Hey, I don't mind. I don't mind. I I'm not that self-conscious, so I don't care at all. Um, Mind Palace, I have heard of Mind Palace. I use something kind of like that. I mean, so but anyway, you have to discuss what you're learning. That's really the biggest study tip. So you have to discuss what you're learning with other people, or write something about what you're learning, right? Or obviously I make content, and so I'm always weaving things that I'm reviewing into my content, and so obviously that's a way of practicing. When I'm making content, I'm practicing the knowledge that I am learning, right? And having those conversations is really the most important. If you want to study this advanced material, then start out with the intro material. I honestly think that's the best study technique. They have all these like, I don't know, people have all these amazing learning techniques and stuff like that. The best way to memorize is not to memorize at the end of the day. The best way to memorize is not to just stuff something into your mind. It's to have a conversation. It's to have a conversation. Yeah. So Socratic method, teaching others about the topic. Yes, teaching others about the topic is great, but not even teaching because you might not know the topic, right, very well. But asking somebody their opinion. So, for instance, like just taking this out of my head. So that in the five dynasties, 10 kingdoms period of China, right? Before the Song Dynasty, what do you think, led to the breakup of these kingdoms? Like, what was the biggest factor, right? And then then it forces you to actually look when you're having a conversation like that, asking those questions, right? It forces you to kind of look into the finer details of it, right? Because there's this big topic, and then you have to dig into the little details. Well, who was emperor? Who were some of the invading armies? Who were some of the factions? Who were some of the warlords? What was the economy like, right? And so it forces you to dig into these details. The more you do that, and the more you have conversations where you're analyzing like that and asking those questions, you basically have to. It forces you to learn more. Um, yeah, that's why Warren exactly Q. I'm gonna call you Q because I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's why learning what you like is important. It is learning what you're genuinely curious about is important. Do I like to play chess? I I'm so bad at chess. I'm so bad at chess. So because partially because obviously I just don't practice it enough. I don't have anybody who I play chess with. So, if you wanna play digital chess with me, I'm open to that. Digital chess, and we can we can do that. I'm open to anything. I'm a learner. Like I love to learn, so I'm open to anything. Right? Tell me anything you're learning, and I'm probably gonna be a little curious about it. So let's talk about this book, Tribal, though. There's the so yeah, yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Sudakina. That's a perfect way of putting it. As you're probing the topic, you're gonna find holes in your knowledge. You're gonna find gaps, and that's gonna force you to look, maybe go and look something up again, and all like, uh, all, all, all Americans look the same. All Americans look the same. Okay, Nikhil. All right. So I don't know how to take that, but the social brain hypothesis. So in this book, um, Tribal, how the cultural instincts that divide us can help us bring us together. I think it's such an important book. A lot of these books on social science and understanding our behavior, human behavior, is really, really important right now. The social brain hypothesis is something that I was reminded of in this book, which is that we have big brains, right? We developed with big brains, we evolved with these big brains, not necessarily um, uh, for like thought, deep thought and analysis. Uh, it's actually uh, it's actually not necessarily in that for that reason. Um, so the hypothesis here is that these big brains that we have helped us survive because uh, um, we are able to we're programmed for social interaction, social cooperation, and they developed, right. They developed to for us to be able to master our social environment, right. So let's see. When I read, how do I do things right? Hold on. Lots of questions here. Good questions. When I read How to Do Things Right, I knew I had the right book. It's called. Okay, I'm not sure. If you could, maybe you could clarify. Abdullah, with so many books, there must be some redundant books. Like if the books are good, why don't we see many people using their concepts? It's like people read no implementation, or most books are not good or redundant. Um, okay, so a lot of you are saying, okay, so Abdullah, that's a good question, or it's a good observation, potentially. And actually, I used to think that. I used to think that a lot of books are repetitive. Oh well, what new knowledge could I learn from like the 20th book on this topic that I'm reading, right? And then I surprised myself. Sometimes, a lot of times, let's be honest though, a lot of times there is redundancy. You're right, but um, many times, yes, I do have a big nose. Good observation, has it? Yes, I do. So, um, basically, what what was your question? So you basically said, yeah. So there is basically a like a repetition, a little bit of a repetition, but not always. Um, a lot of times there's a lot of good information in books. That's why I like to. I actually have partnered with Shortform. It's a great service. I mean, you guys can find the links. Actually, you can get a discount on my link in a lot of my videos, any of my videos actually. So what I like to do actually is I like to read the short version from Shortform, um, and I like to read that short version first to see if it's worth my reading or if it's just like repetitive. And then if it's like repetitive, I probably won't read the whole book. If it's maybe too basic or something, I probably won't go and get the whole book. But then if I read it, read that summary, and I say, you know what, this actually sounds like it has a lot of good points. Um, yeah, but anyway, and then I'll go and read the bigger book. So yes, I'm gonna get into the book. All right, and I'm trying to balance answering your comments and getting into the book. So okay, I'm actually gonna, instead of going through the points, I'm gonna talk about my biggest takeaways from the book. I'm not even gonna go to my notes. So Tribal, from this book, one of the most important takeaways I think that the author here mentions is the us versus them. I think a lot of us actually, and this struck me because we always think, we're really programmed for us versus them, right? This mentality, this group mentality, like, hey, whatever, white people versus black people, or this religion versus the other religion, or we think of ourselves in these kinds of groups, and we think of ourselves as like hostile, or we see examples throughout history of people being hostile based on race, based on religion, based on ethnicity, based on, man, a million different things, right? And so, to our minds, to our eyes, this looks like, humans inherently have this us versus them mentality. We're inherently violent. We're inherently, hateful to other people. We're inherently just that way. And what the evidence actually, this author puts together some really amazing evidence that I actually wasn't aware of in this way in behavioral science, pointing out that a lot of good evidence that us versus them, this us versus them mentality, isn't actually innate. The us mentality, just us mentality, yes, group identity, like thinking of ourselves as proud of our culture or proud of our, or just identifying with, our race or our gender or whatever. That is innate. That part is innate, but identifying as a part of a certain group or as a part of a culture or part of a political party or whatever that is, that does not necessitate, baked into that is not a an idea of violence toward the other group. It doesn't necessitate an idea of exclusion of another group, or that is more of an environmental factor That is more due to things that a chain reaction, so to speak, of events that have happened throughout history that have kind of led to um, what you could call it tribalism in terms of the violence and things like that. So um, so yeah, for instance, here's a good quote by the author. So evolution, this is a quote, evolution focused its group-related motives on us, the in-groups that kept our forebears alive day to day, not them, the out-groups that our forebears encountered only occasionally. Humans evolved solidaristic instincts to unify, help, and preserve their groups that involve different kinds of shared knowledge. Although these instincts can indirectly contribute to conflicts with other groups, solidarity within the group does not directly entail hostility toward other groups. Conflicts can escalate to hostility, but assuming that they start from hostility is inaccurate and unhelpful. And so I think this is a really great quote. I'm actually going to get farther away from this heater. This heater is always a little bit noisy. All right, so let me actually go over here until that heater's off. But basically, what this shows, right? What this shows is that we should have some way, and somebody in the chat mentioned like social engineering. This idea of social engineering has a bad rap associated with it, and for very good cause, right? Back in the United States, at least, and actually through Europe in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was the progressive movement and the progressive era, and in the progressive era, a lot of social engineering kind of thought patterns emerged. You had this idea of social engineering, obviously, in Nazi Germany, and so this idea of social engineering has come to have a very bad name. But if you do social engineering in a way that's manipulating people, right? Manipulating people into, buying into whatever you're selling, right? Just to manipulate someone. That is actually, I would say that's an unethical way of social engineering, but I would say it can be done consensually. And that's why I'm a big proponent on this channel of critical thinking. So I would say an ethical way of social engineering is to simply promote critical thinking as a cultural norm. And yes, you can do that through these little tactics, right? Of appealing to authorities and appealing to group dynamics and stuff like that. Yes. You can do it through all of that. But at the end of the day, the goal should be free to use your own mind, right? Train people. Let's train ourselves how to use our own mind independently and come to our own conclusion. I actually believe that the future, like if you look at the past, if you look at history, one of the big problems in history is, oh, here's my ideology, I'm right. Oh, here's another ideology, no, we're right. Oh, no, things can be done better with free markets. No, things can be done better with communism, right? It doesn't matter. So there are many, many different ideologies that come about. And one of the big problems is that we have this cycle of ideology. Hegel, the philosopher Hegel, called this the, pendulum of history: action, reaction, counter-reaction, reaction to the counter-reaction, and so forth. And I think one of the big ways that we can have a more peaceful world, ultimately, is through not focusing on what ideology is right, not promoting a specific ideology. Don't promote a specific ideology. Promote the process. Promote a process. Promote methods for coming to knowledge, coming to the truth. Don't promote the truth. Here's the truth you must believe right now. Here's what you absolutely have to accept right now. All right, that's not the way to do things. And here the heater is back off, so I can get back on the bed. All right, with my dog. All right, with my dog Athena. Right, here she is. Yes. Anyway, Um, I love my dog. I love dogs in general, but I especially love my dog, right? So I know it's in-group favoritism. Not really in-group favoritism because I'm not a dog, but anyway, at least I think I'm not a dog. How could I know, right? But anyway, so at the end of the day, what I think we have to promote is that there's a process to come to a result, and but not a that there's a process. We should promote a process and a method like that. So, for instance, teaching kids in school, critical thinking. Like, okay, here's a claim. Even in chemistry class, hey, we found out at some point Dalton's experiments. Okay, we found out at some point that there are these particles called atoms. Well, when I was in school, I used to think, well, how do you know that? Why am I just supposed to believe what the science teacher said? Right? Now, I agree, and I'll answer your question, Abo, in a moment. I agree that I actually agree that obviously, like, you shouldn't be super skeptical about everything. You shouldn't doubt everything, right? You'll never be able to live your life. But that's a great question, curious question from a young child, right? How do you know this, teacher? Why am I supposed to just believe what you say, teacher, right? How do you have the evidence? That's a great, that's a great habit to instill in somebody, the curiosity, to ask questions, right? To learn then, how do you find the methods and sources? So, for instance, the teacher could just easily say, oh, well, Dalton's experiments back in, when did Dalton? 1600s? When Dalton did, I forget. When Dalton did his experiments back in, I think the 1600s, but no, that's Francis Bacon. I'm mixing them up. I'm mixing up my history of science, but at the moment. But anyway, when Dalton did his experiments, we found certain evidence of atoms, and then we've had some experimental evidence as we've gone on, and atoms end up being a very predictive model. That's all the teacher has to say. But we should learn critical thinking in school, so that, listen, if you do critical thinking, and here's my answer to who asked me to like what religion I believe in, but more importantly, it's like, what religion should you believe in? What should you believe in life in general? Well, use your critical thinking, right? And ultimately, if you use your critical thinking, you come to the conclusion, okay, Christianity is correct, or Islam is correct, or Buddhism is correct, Hindu is correct, or no religion, is correct. Whatever that conclusion is, that's a more tempered approach, right? It's the same with politics. Is this point of view correct, or this one correct, or that one correct? It's not about the point of view at the end of the day that's important. What's important, I believe, is not so much the point of view we come to, the conclusion we come to, it's the process we use to get there. And I believe if we use that common process, we spread that throughout our culture to use this common process, we'll have a more peaceful world. We'll have a more peaceful world. People will have the right to believe what they believe, which is important. But to answer your question, yeah, I am. I would consider myself secular, right? I would say I'm secular. I don't have any particular religion, but that's the thing. You can respect. We can learn to respect each other, right? That people have religions. People have this religion or that religion, different religions, without killing each other, right? Isn't that important? So I think there are, and it's not just, religion, but yeah, actually, Renovacio, welcome to the chat. I'm glad you bring that up. It's not going to help most people because they're stubborn. You have to ask why people are stubborn. Why? It's because, and this goes back to behavioral science and how people change their minds. Here's another good book for you guys, How Minds Change. How Minds Change by, who is the author? How Minds Change. Hold on. How Minds Change. Yeah, David McRaney. David McRaney, How Minds Change. People's minds can change. And I don't have time to go into all the process of how do people's minds change, how do you change people's minds even if they're stubborn. The only thing I will say is it is very possible, and you'd be surprised how quickly it's and how easy in many cases it is for people to change their mind. Let's put it this way, Renovacio. People, you will never convince people with facts and evidence only. I will say not only facts and evidence. It actually does require facts and evidence, but not only facts and evidence. At the end of the day, it requires people to be able to shift how they see themselves, right? You'd say personal identity. Shift how they see themselves just a little bit. And also, yeah, I really recommend it. You'll see what I'm saying. It requires people to shift how they see themselves a little bit. And yes, and also it requires them to well, yes, mostly to shift how they see themselves, right? It's beliefs are mostly based on our identity, and for the most rational of us, yeah, we think we're really rational, right? And sure, I mean, but we all have assumptions and we all have priors, right? We all have assumptions. So we think we're very rational, but it's the same for us too. It's actually the same for all human beings. If you're a human being, this is how you come to a process of belief. It's just true, right? We don't think, oh, here's a logical, process that I'm going to go through. No, you start with the conclusion, and then you logic your way to, okay, how do I get to that conclusion? It's the same with how we all think, and that's why I'm saying here, as a cultural matter, a matter of cultural change, I think it's more important for us to understand how to change the process that we use to come to a conclusion, the process we use to come to a conclusion. Changing that is more important than the conclusions we make ultimately. Because the thing is, yes. So Renovacio, you hit the nail on the head, actually. You actually hit the nail. This is a key point. I'm based in logical and critical thinking. Yeah, so you might be, I'm not going to say your whole name, Laku. You might be more than others, maybe more than average, but still, you still have those tendencies because you're still human, right? So, but the thing is that, Renovacio, you hit the nail on the head. If we go into a conversation saying that somebody's wrong, what's the person's response? If we go in with some combative side, saying somebody's wrong, what you're doing is you're threatening that person's identity. So if you're threatening the person's identity, because you're threatening their belief, what happens? They strengthen their belief. And in fact, research has shown when you use that approach of trying to prove somebody wrong and debating them, actually the more evidence you show them that they're wrong, the less they believe in your point of view. The more they hold to their point of view. So how do you convince them? Well, read the book. Read that book. It's very, very helpful. I mean, there are actually too many techniques to go into. There's something called street epistemology that's very, very effective. To some extent, you have to appeal to their self-interest in some way. You have to appeal to their identity. In Renovacio, you say, so Laku, yeah, How Minds Change by David McRaney, right? and we'll discover our own biases. Because I'll be the first to admit I have biases. I have biases. I will admit I'm probably wrong about 95% of what I believe. Why? Because I'm human. I'm human, and I know that sounds like a big number. 95% of what I believe is wrong. Yeah, probably. Probably. Who knows? 100 years from now, I have a certain scientific worldview, but how's our scientific worldview going to change 100 years from now? Probably drastically. So, is 95% of what I believe probably wrong? Sure. Might there be new philosophical frameworks in the future that show that another form of thinking was inaccurate? Sure. Right? Do I have maybe certain views about it just could be a number of things. Ethics that might be wrong. So that's where it's easy to lose ourselves. It's easy to lose ourselves and think, well, then there's no point, right? And there's no. But it's humbling because once we figure out, like Laku, once we figure out, and everybody, Renovasio and everybody here. So once we actually, Laku, you have an important point here that I'll address. Once we basically, what was I going to say? Well, you distracted me. I'm going to address your point. So, Laku, you say, hold on. Laku, of course, hey, guys, if I missed your question, feel free to repeat it, because I know a lot of your questions are going pretty fast, and you really want your question answered, feel free to repeat it in the chat. But, so, of course, we have all have biases, Laku. You say, but I guarantee that no biases are as detrimental to society as religious beliefs that large portions of the population enforce upon others on societal scales. Well, here's the thing. Laku. I actually kind of used to agree with you in this way. Here's how I see it now. We look at things like religion, things that are doctrines. What are some of those? Well, a political party is a doctrine, is a set of doctrines, right? A political belief is basically it's an ideological belief system. Any of them. Nationalism is also a belief system, right? And here's I am very hesitant nowadays to be very black and white about this, and that religion does this and does that, because you know what, I will tell you, I am friends with atheists, I am friends with Muslims, I am friends with Christians, I'm friends with people who have a lot of different points of view, and it's something that I notice is that, and I'm secular myself. Yes, yeah, sure. Laku, yes, it can. So, what I have concluded at this point is that people interpret their religion differently. You can talk to one Muslim, for instance, and they'll have a very different understanding of their religion than another Muslim, right? Christians, right? You go to, I mean, this is clear if you live in the United States, especially. There's, the history of Christianity in the United States is, every few years there's a different version of Christianity coming out, right? I mean, at some point there was this explosion of different sects of Christianity, and so, for instance, Puritan Christianity, they see the world a very different way than Quakers or Unitarians. I mean, it's just so different, to the point that Quakers are almost like, yeah, I know, this coffee cup lasts for a while. I'm just sipping it, that's why. Well, Renovasio, here's a good question. So let me wrap up what I was saying here. So I don't think it's necessarily religion that's the problem. Okay, I think it's the person themselves that ends up being the problem. How are you going to, because the way a lot of beliefs work, systems of beliefs, you can end up interpreting them in many different ways, and people just do. And people just do. Danny, welcome, welcome. We're talking about some books and some of the things that we're taking away from the books right now. How Minds Change by David McRaney is a great book. Renovasio, do you think it's worth changing someone? I mean, it's much more cognitive effort to do it the correct way to change someone in a positive way. Well, and here's the thing: should we try to change someone? Or should we be open? You know, Jürgen Habermas, even the philosopher Jürgen Habermas, he wrote the theory of communicative action. You know, I think he would agree with this idea that if we go into a conversation with the intention of even just changing someone, it might be the wrong intention. I try to go into a conversation now with people with the intention of maybe I'll learn something. It's very hard, trust me. Maybe I'll be changed, right? Maybe my point of view will be changed, right? And in some cases, we know that that's less likely than others, but still, we go into that conversation with an open mind. I find that the more we approach a conversation with that simply that attitude, the other person can actually feel it, that we're not trying to convince them, we're not trying to change them. And interestingly, the more likely they might be to change if we take that approach. Does that make sense? So, um, so, so Samuel, well, again, I would just say, uh, you know, that's another thing. If we're going into a conversation, you're talking about political beliefs or social beliefs. If we're going into a conversation thinking that we're already right, maybe that's the problem, right? I might be wrong when I go into a conversation. I might be wrong. I might be right, but my goal should be to what? To learn something. Maybe I'll learn something. Maybe they'll learn something. Our mutual goal from conversation should be we both learn something. We both walk away learning something, right? If we're going into the conversation already thinking I'm right, I'm thinking I'm going to convince this person I'm right, right? And that's my goal of the conversation. I think we've already lost. Because why? And I'll prove it. I'll prove it. It's it's basically this is the history of the world. That attitude of going into a conversation or going into an interaction already thinking I'm right. That's the history of violence. That's the history of conflict. That's the history of wars. That's the history of, you know, every evil that we've seen in the world. That's the history of it. It's taking that attitude when we go into a conversation. So isn't it time we stop taking that attitude when we come into a conversation? Have you read Covering Islam? I have not, Laku. So thanks for the recommendation. I will check it out. And Renovasio, it's never the things or the means that are to blame. It's the people and how they use them. And I'm not sure if I just misunderstood you, Renovasio. But yeah, I do believe that. Um, and then those beliefs are intentionally wielded to exploit the believers. Yes, yes. You know, and again, I think it's true for any belief system. You know, nationalism can be used that way. That's clear. That's obvious in our day and age, right? Nationalism can be used to exploit and manipulate people. Any system of belief can be used to exploit and manipulate people, right? Oh yeah, it is. It is much more effort. It's, you know, Renovasio, I tell you, it takes more self-control. It takes more self-control to go into a conversation that way. So that speaks to our own personal growth. Like we need to all get better as people to be able to be that kind of person who can approach a conversation that way. Yeah, absolutely. National myths, yeah, are just as damning as creation myths. Absolutely. Sure, we can say that. National myths are just that. They're myths, right? So thanks, guys. I really appreciate always hanging out with you guys. This has been a fun conversation. I didn't get into as many books as I wanted to cover in this live stream, but if you want to learn, if you want to see more of my content, feel free to subscribe. If you want to see more of the courses and the membership program that I do, you want to work with me directly, feel free to check out the links in my About section of my profile. But Yeah, definitely love spending time with you guys, and feel free to. I'm live, Q. I'm live every Wednesday at the same time. Every Wednesday at the same time. So, definitely. And if you guys want me to go live more often, I will try as well. But yeah, thanks guys, and thank you Laku for the sub. I appreciate it. I appreciate hanging out with you guys. Let's grow this community. Let's spread this idea throughout our culture. Critical thinking, being a better critical thinker, creating peace in the world, creating a change in the world, helping everybody around us thrive. So, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your